Hello and welcome to all our viewers and listeners to the latest episode of the Reverse Sweep Show. As ever, this is your host SS, and joining me as ever is my co-host AB. It's been an enthralling test match so far, India versus England at Headingley. What do you make of it? Which direction is it going, AB?
Yeah, clearly India has had a good start to the match. Better than what I expected, honestly, and really good to see the passing of the baton and how Gill, Jaiswal, and Rishabh Pant have scored runs in this test match. But then we'll have to see how India fares with the ball. And that Bumrah no ball late last year giving us some deja vu, some scaries back from 2017. How about USS? What's your take on the match?
Yeah, it's an enthralling setup. It can go either ways, especially considering how baseball England fares. So really looking forward to the day's play. But before we get to that, we have an episode to record. You mentioned about Bumrah's no ball 2017. I had fond memories of watching cricket in 2000s where India and England were both faring up and down teams. So exciting to watch. And we thought to do an episode around this. We have done multiple episodes around test dynasties and also had a all format 11 episode as well for the future. And we thought to couple all these things together and make an episode around anti-dynasties.
Quick timeout. If you are loving this dive into cricket's wild twists and turns, hit that like button and subscribe to the Reverse Sweep Show.
And if you've got that one friend who can't stop talking about cricket, share this episode with them and bring them into the squad.
Now back to the main episode. SS, while talking about the topic for today, you said anti-dynasties, but then it's very important. What do we mean by anti-dynasties? Whenever I think about anti-dynasties, these are teams which have always troubled the otherwise dynastic teams. They have always pulled their A game when they are facing the best in the world. And for example, I mean, we'll of course talk more about it going forward in the episode, but then something which a lot of us Indian fans can relate to, something like New Zealand. Uh, India always struggled, India under Virat Kohli, Ravi Shastri always struggled against New Zealand in those crunch moments and knockout matches. So something around those kind of situations where a dynasty level team would always struggle against some particular teams. So that is what we mean by anti-dynasty. Now, what are the characteristics of these anti-dynasties? Personally, when I think about them, I think about teams which are very inconsistent. So on their day, they can be a complete flop show. They can get bundled out for 100, but then on some other days when their batters are clicking, they can score upwards of 300 in a ODI match, can score 500, 600 in a test match in an innings when their batters are clicking. So super inconsistent. So on their day, they can create the biggest of upsets. Or on the other side, teams which are extremely consistent, which have a very clear ceiling and can only perform within that range. So they don't go below that, don't go above that. So when the other very strong team has an off day, these teams are able to capitalize on that. Another thing which I can think of is teams which have some players with individual brilliance who on their day can just single-handedly win the match. And I think these are broadly the characteristics that I can think of. Anything else is that comes to your mind when you think about anti-dynasties? How do you define them, or if you feel they have some other characteristics?
I think you have covered it very well. I think there's one thing that also which will feature in our examples is that there are phases in which a dynasty is actually on the wane and a team is on the up. And there is a contest that happens when these two things are happening simultaneously. And in world cricket, at the top of cricket, little margins here and there, and then an advantage could be taken care. But yeah, we will come to these specific cases. I think first, because we did an episode on the Great West Indies dynasty, there is so much to talk about the dynasty, and there are points which are of interest. That even though they had a dynasty of 15 odd years, there were moments where teams could come in and make an upset, or what we are calling as anti-dynasty. And I think AB, you have one to start off with.
Yeah, although when we spoke about West Indies, we were talking more about their dynasty in Test cricket. But then we also touched upon the fact that they were a dynasty even in white ball cricket. When the ODI World Cup started in 75, West Indies won that. 79 back-to-back World Cup wins. 83, they came this close to winning a World Cup again. But then there was the team from India, Kapil Dev's men, who were standing between them and the trophy. And I think that one team has to be called an anti-dynasty. Now, when we think about it, then West Indies were the clear favorites walking into the tournament, but India was able to pull that off. I think if we have to relate with the characteristics that we spoke of, then there were moments of individual brilliance. That 175 by Kapil Dev against Zimbabwe in the tournament, that catch that Kapil Dev took off Viv Richards, which was a turning point in the final. You have to call that these were points of individual brilliance. But I also feel, given the structure that Indian team had in that tournament, they were a percentages team. They had people who could step up in those situations and take the team across the line. And West Indies had an off day. India were able to capitalize and win the cup.
And a lot of all-round capability as well, and led by a charismatic captain. So a lot of things going India's favor. And speaking of charismatic captains, I have got the next story. I've been reading a bit on the great Pakistan team of late 80s, which won series versus England in Australia at home. And they also went away to India and win a five-test match series. I think the famous Gavaskar in the fifth test match trying on a square turning wicket, I think made 96 or odd runs and got out, and Pakistan won the test match and won the series 1-0. And then they thrashed India in the ODI series. But the big point, which a lot of people don't know about or have read a little less about, is that Pakistan became the world number one test team when ICC did a retrospective world ranking rollout. They were categorized as the world number one team for a brief period in 1987-88 period when they drew away in West Indies 1-1, captained by the recently retired and coming back Imran Khan. He has had so many comebacks in his life, and that was a time as well when he made a comeback. Charismatic captain. You had young Wasim Akram. You had the full and firing Javed Miandad, Salim Malik, Ramiz Raja, great batting depth. And West Indies were a bit down because of the Packer series. A lot of big players were missing out in the first Test match, which Pakistan won. Javed Miandad made a century. Viv Richards and Malcolm Marshall weren't playing as well, and Pakistan took full advantage of it. And West Indies later came back in the third Test match, won a close two-wicket win. Series was drawn 1-1, but Pakistan became world number one because of this. And if I have to categorize this team, which Pakistan was fairly consistent, a lot of teams used to fear them a lot in late 80s because of these skillful players that they had and very tough to beat them in their own surroundings. But they had return of that charismatic captain. You had the team just not playing its best players, which was West Indies in this case, and then the other team is able to take advantage. So this Pakistan team are not to them.
This is actually quite fascinating, SS, and kudos to you for bringing up this story. I had no idea that something like this had happened back in the 80s, that ICC had done a retrospective ranking. But I think these are the kind of stories that we do this podcast for. And then, of course, when we talk about the West Indies team, we have to talk about that 95 series where Australia visited the West Indian shores and was able to win a series, which in a way was the passing of the baton. Australia was a team on the rise. West Indies was a team towards the very end stage of their dynasty. And Australia was fired up by Steve Waugh scoring a double century. I think, as you were telling me, that
Correct.
Steve
Yeah.
Waugh scored a double century, was the highest run scorer in the entire series, 400 plus runs, an average of 100 plus. Glenn
Impressive.
McGrath starting off at his peak, 17 wickets in the series. So Australia was able to win 2-1. And this was, in a way, a passing of baton.
Yeah. And also, we did an episode around the invincibility of that Calypso Kings episode, which has received a lot of good attention on YouTube as well. And there we featured this series a lot. And this is a classic example of that there is a inevitable acknowledgement that one team is better, and but there is an incumbent who has been so successful, and this is like the true passing of the baton when the other team really stamps his authority, makes big runs, has got good quality bowlers, and you could see that the tide had turned. And this was the example. Uh, this was about the great West Indies team and how Australia took the baton. And the next part is when Australia took the baton, completely dominated for good 10, 15 years. But there were moments where some teams were able to take advantage. And I think maybe no better place to start than with our own Indian cricket team.
Yeah, Australia, when you talk about them, absolute invincibles. They were on a 16 test winning streak. and they come up against some individual brilliance from Indian players. The first time this happened was at Eden Gardens in Kolkata, probably one of the most iconic test matches of this century. They came up against VVS Laxman and Dravid, who just would not stop batting. They made them field for an entire day. They were back and out in the match. Indian team was back and out in the match, but then an entire day of batting. VVS Laxman scoring 281, Dravid scoring 180 odd. Partnership for the ages, and then India was able to win because of the last innings heroics from Harbhajan Singh, and Australia collapsing on the last day and giving us one of the most memorable test matches of our lifetimes, at least, and ending that 16 test winning streak of Australia. But then a lot of people don't know India didn't do it just once, India did it twice. Australia again found themselves on a 16 test winning streak in 2008. And right after that Monkey Gate scandal, India at Perth was able to do another upset, as we can say, and end that winning streak.
Yeah, and also in that famous 2001 series, big shout out to Harbhajan Singh. I think he was the guy who took like 31 wickets in three test matches. Amazing effort. India not only came back and won that historic Kolkata test match, which we still keep talking about 25 years to this day almost, but we also won in Chennai, a close fought two-wicket win, and we won the series 2-1. And not a lot of teams had come down 1-0 to win a three-match series, let alone winning against a generational team like that Australian team. And then, of course, the Perth 2008 one, with all the emotions and all the things flaring up after Monkey Gate in Sydney. I think that was an epic win. Uh, but within those two, 2001 and 2008, we also had a certain English team doing something in 2005. Uh, English team had been picking up paces by winning a lot of series at home. Good fast bowling attack, Harmison, Hoggard, and a young Welshman, Simon Jones, flying in. You had Andrew Flintoff as the fourth bowler, Ashley Giles as a wily spinner, and then you had Peterson coming in. You had Strauss and Trescothick and Michael Vaughan, pretty decent top order as well. And it was a perfect storm kind of moment. A team picking up the emotions of Ashes, and then Glenn McGrath rolling his ankle over a cricket ball, and then things can happen. A rub of the green going England's way, and they were able to topple the great Australian side 2-1, one of the greatest series ever. Actually goes along with the India-Australia series that we talked about, the two of the greatest series. And that was a point where people started questioning that whether Australia is now losing its edge.
Yeah, and then we see they eventually lost their edge around 2008 when a lot of their star players retired, Ponting coming towards the fag end of his career. But then there was this other team which took the baton, and we spoke about South Africa. And South Africa actually had a few good victories against them. 2008, they had that famous ODI win where they chased down 438. And we know, like, again, a stuff of ages, like that Jack Culler's speech after the first innings when Australia scored 400, which was done for the first time in an ODI match ever. Jack Culler's coming into the dressing room and telling everyone that Australia are, 20 runs short, and then Herschel Gibbs batting the way he does, and South Africa chasing that down, started showing the first kind of chinks in those armor that Australia had towards the end of their dynasty. And then, of course, that South African team visiting Australia and defeating Australia in Australia. And as we know, they didn't just do it once, they ended up doing it thrice. And that was, in a way, again, we spoke about the South African mini dynasty. That was, again, kind of
Yeah.
passing of the baton.
I think an interesting observation, which I was thinking, maybe we digress for a second, is that the West Indies dynasty, they won the 75-79 World Cup. They should have won the 83 World Cup, but we punctured them. They did not reach the semis of 87 World Cup, and I don't think they were too deep in the 92 World Cup either. So even though they dominated the Test arena for almost 15 years, a good part of that, more than 10 years, they were not the best team when it came to white ball cricket, at least by the ICC tournaments. Because India also won the 85 World Championship also in Australia, where Ravi Shastri had that famous Opel car and all that. Unlike Australia, which had great dominance in Test cricket, of course, punctured by the incidents we talked about, the series, but they had really good ODI cricket still going. They won the 99, 2003, 2007 World Cup. They were usually winning all the bilaterals as well and the Tri Nations. And even in 2011, they came up and inspired Yuvraj Singh in Ahmedabad and they lost it. So even though he's starting to lose mojo in Test cricket, they would invariably be really good in one day cricket, which is very interesting to think about, which I never thought about too much. And they were like great, revenge takers. 2005, okay, you beat us, England. You come to our shows. Our guys are playing our last series, but we'll thrash you 5-0 if you want to. But yeah, that was about the great Australian team and the antis to that. South Africa being the latest one that we talked about, who are now the World Test champions as well. They again broke Australia's hearts. But now we did an episode around the Kohli Shastri era, and so much to talk about it. Which is that one team that you feel are the so-called kryptonites of this Kohli Shastri team?
It says like those wounds are still fresh, and we spoke about that team during the initial part of this episode. None other than the Black Caps. They have been a thorn in our flesh in all the ICC knockout tournaments. 2019 World Cup semifinals, we were the clear favorites walking in, but then rain impacted day, losing the momentum. A new day, pitch with a lot of moisture, Kiwi bowlers getting the swing that they always do in helpful conditions, and our batters faltering. A few bad overs, a few bad minutes of play, and then India finds itself way back in the match. So we were knocked out. That was the first that we talk about, and then again in the World Test Championship final, one bad session of play, and India finds itself way back in the match, and New Zealand win their first ICC tournament. So I think this New Zealand team was one that was always an anti-dynasty to the otherwise could have been dynasty of the Kohli Shastri era.
And even in the late Kohli Shastri era, in the Rohit Sharma GG era, which still has a lot of remnants, New Zealand are still there. I was still reading something that people still cannot believe how they come to our shore and win a series 3-0 at our home. It probably will go down as one of the biggest upsets in cricket history. And it was again the same New Zealand team, good prepared, well prepared, caught India napping, had some luck with the pitches and tosses, and they did a whitewash. So it's always New Zealand and India.
And just to give a context, as we spoke about this particular instance, like New Zealand coming to Indian shows and how they have performed in one of the earlier episodes of season one.
Absolutely.
They
They
had
don't
never
have the
won a
skill
series.
set. They don't have fast spin. They don't have the batting to play such Ashwin or Jadeja. But there they had it. They had all proving us wrong.
The last time that they actually came close to winning a series, we had to go way back to 1969.
And we
That
did
is
an
how
episode
dominant
of,
India has been. Yeah,
and we did an episode even around that as well.
yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, since you also mentioned about Bumrah no ball to Harry Brook last evening, it created it reopened wounds of 2017 Champions Trophy final, a certain day where India was absolutely favorites, especially going with our record in ICC events against Pakistan, how dominant we were in the tournament as well, how that team was led, and then things could happen and a Fakar Zaman happened, and we just couldn't deal with it. And yeah, so that is also a case of Pakistan watering down the Kohli Shastri era, but
Yeah.
it is something that we will always remember.
Yeah, on the contrary, I was about to say that that's a day that I would always want to forget. But you remind me of that day, and then you tell me that we'll always remember that. But yeah, as we are a what ifs podcast, we always like to imagine the hypotheticals. So I have an interesting question for you since we are so close to the Indian cricket team. My question to you is what how could you have made that Kohli Shastri era anti-dynasty proof so that we are able to step up in those crunch moments, we're able to win those knockout matches, not have an off day like we had in 2017 Champions Trophy, or not have all the batters faltering at once against a Kiwi bowling attack in 2019. So how do you make that uh, Kohli Shastri era team anti-dynasty proof?
It's a great question, AB, and a great hypothetical to think about, and so many what ifs around it. I think for white ball, the answer is a little easier for me because if you take the example of 2019 World Cup, uh, and even in general, when this Shastri team was dominating bilaterals everywhere, and I think Pinnacle was winning series away in South Africa 5-1 or 6-1, and the Kulcha effect. I think Shastri era for me in both white ball and red ball is defined by a plan a great plan A, and that is so good that it'll work 90% of times. But when it falters, especially when it comes to team combination, you have problems against really good sides. In white ball cricket, of course, we've spoken in T20s, we were behind the curve when it came to West Indies comparison and also in England in ODI cricket. And I think a reason for that is not because of our, like Rohit Sharma and Dhawan were not batting fast. I think we had Kedar Jadhav as your sixth bowler. We had so much confidence on our five bowlers that they will always deliver, that whenever one of them gets pummeled, like Kuldeep in that 2019 World Cup game against England, you never had that six bowler. Jadhav was decent, but not really good that he could stop runs or take wickets. And that era of the sixth bowler being dibbly dobbly could work. You needed to have a proper sixth bowler, even though you have Hardik as well. I mean, Hardik was a pretty decent, but still, you needed that kind of insurance. And also, your bowlers couldn't bat, and that lengthening allowed the Galbis effect to come into play, which still happened to the date in 2023 World Cup final as well, that your bowlers can't bat, your batters can't bowl. I think this was like the main point for one day and T20 cricket. When it comes to Test cricket, it's much more harder to pinpoint. I think that all the ingredients, they're winning series at home and also winning Test matches away. Of course, not clinching the series in South Africa, losing the World Test Championship final. I think that came to circumstantial and situational things around pitches. I think Hardik Pandya's fitness could have been, if he would have been fitter more, we could have had much more balanced team in most of these games. And also, felt, I think the post 2018 BGT, I think Pujara and Rahane became a little bit inconsistent. That created a lot of pressure, and we couldn't put up top runs. But it could also be a factor of top end bowling conditions that we have right now. So it's much more harder to comment on red ball than white ball.
Actually, the match that we are just seeing right now, India playing in England, that is such a contrast to what we had been observing for the last few years. That the top order was always struggling, and it was always the middle order, lower middle order that was bailing us out. So I think it was quite refreshing to see the top order actually perform once
But
three
not so
centuries in the top
refreshing,
five.
not so
To see
refreshing seeing
the
lower middle order collapse.
but that is sports for you.
But yeah, AB, since you asked me a hypothetical question, I have something back for you more from future angle. We also remember teams like Zimbabwe also creating a lot of problems for India in the past. I remember I was seeing a graphic yesterday. Andy Flower had a crazy average of 94 versus India and all. But from a more sustainable puncturing of a dynastic team, which team do you think has the potential in white ball and red ball cricket to do that more consistently, or you think that dynasty teams will fear playing them in big tournaments?
So we have got to talk about a very strong team right now, Australia. The last ODI World Cup, they were almost knocked out by this team called Afghanistan. The last T20 World Cup, they were actually knocked out by them. And I think Afghanistan, in a way, has reached that anti-dynasty status. And in the future, we are going to see a lot more upsets. Um, Good teams, tier one teams losing against Afghanistan, or maybe even Afghanistan elevating to the level of a tier one team.
Yeah.
They have made it to the knockouts of ICC tournament already, and they are consistently competing and faring so well against all these elite teams. Until a few years back, Afghanistan was just a two-player, three-player kind of a team. You had Rashid Khan leading in the bowling attack. You had maybe one or two batters here and there. Mohammad Nabi coming in.
Nabi and
Yeah,
Zadran, but now they have
Nabi
many
and
more.
Satran. They have many more. They are a proper side right now. And in ODIs and T20Is, definitely they have that caliber. They have that potential to cause an upset on their day. I feel, are one of those teams which can be inconsistent, but on their day they can create that upset.
They're
So
not
I
too
think
far
for
away from
me,
winning an Asia Cup, actually.
yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so that's my pick, Afghanistan. What do you think about that, SS? Any other team that comes to your mind, or
Yeah, I'm trying to benchmark with like a Pakistan or Sri Lanka back in the day. Who are the team that have the skilled players and who are mercurial, and on a given day they have individual brilliance to take the game away if you are not up to the mark. I think Afghanistan has already shown us that. And unfortunately, I don't see any other team because I don't want to categorize New Zealand under because New Zealand is always a percentage team. They have no secrets now. Everyone knows, and they're legitimately really good team. So I wouldn't classify them as an anti-dynastic field. I mean, if you lose to them, well played. You can beat them. I mean, yeah. But I think for the future proofing, I really see potential in Afghanistan, provided they have systemic support and everything working for them. They are really building a good core, and with Jonathan Trott's leadership in management available there, I think they have got a really good future. But what about red ball, AB?
Red ball. So we have already seen that happen. This World Test Championship, we have a new winner, South Africa. Until a few years back, we all felt that South Africa was out and out, like way out of a World Test Championship final contention. Their entire test playing future was a big debate. But then somehow they have been able to, because of multiple factors going their way, they have been able to create a good team of players. They have a lot of young players, Varian, Rickelton. They have Aiden Markram firing all
And
cylinders. They have
always good and always good young fast bowlers coming through South Africa.
Rabada, Ngidi. They have a good pace attack. They have so many other pace bowlers who weren't even a part of the squad, like Gerald Coetzee. Overall, I think they are
Nandre Burger, a lot of them, yeah.
Nanderberger. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that is one team which is going to be a big threat to any potential red ball dynasty. Probably they can create one of their own. Who knows, with India, Australia going through massive transitions, England already is in that transition. So probably South Africa can actually create a dynasty of their own, but we'll have to wait and watch.
Well, and they can certainly claim to be so. They are the world champions. Nobody can take them away, even though people might question that they didn't win a three-match, five-match series versus India away. But we'll find out. They will soon be touring India as well. But there you have it, guys. This was today's episodes on anti-dynasties, the teams that will break the so-called dynasty teams. But hope you enjoyed the episode. Do like, share, and subscribe, and keep supporting us. We publish weekly on all podcasting platforms, including YouTube. A lot of short form content as well on social media. Do give us a follow there, and we will soon be back with another episode next weekend. Till then, bye bye.